I began obsessively making visual images when I was about 3 years old. As soon as I was old enough to hold a crayon and realized that I could take things that were inside of me from my imagination, my mind, my feelings, and bring them out onto a sheet of paper using whatever tools I had at my disposal. And in the beginning, it was crayons, the big box of 64 Crayola crayons, one of my favorite things to get for birthdays and Christmas when I was a child. And later on, other materials. And I would draw whenever I could. And even when I wasn't supposed to, but I would draw at the dinner table. I would draw on the floor in front of the television. I would spend hours in my room drawing. I would draw in the car, draw when we went on vacation. I would draw in school, draw in my books, draw on my desk, draw on other people's books. Probably drew on other people's desks too. And I was just drawing all the time, and I still do that. And as a result of the fact that I'm always making images, and I want people to see them, and I've always, when I was a kid, I'd show pictures to my mother, look what I did, and then later on my friends, my classmates, and eventually, I started showing in galleries and shows and things like that. People see my work. So from time to time, I am occasionally accused of having talent. And that's a word that I've never been comfortable with, because for me it implies that the skill, which is a word I am comfortable with, that I have is a product of some kind of natural ability that I was born with, which couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is that the skill that I have is the product of many, many hours of study and practice, and a lot of bad drawings. Sad but true. So what I'd like to talk about today is, specifically the development of skill, of technique. I did a video a while back called Make Great Art, in which I talked about what I feel are the major components that go into a great work of art. And on one hand, you have skill and knowledge, and then on the other side is authenticity, creativity. And what I'd like to focus on in this video is really the development of technique. And what I think is really important, and I can't stress this enough, I think it's of the utmost importance that if you're making art, if you're engaged in some kind of creative visual image making process, that you devote some of your time, especially if you're a beginner, but really at any level, that you devote some of your practice time to specifically developing technique and knowledge too, which is important. Just studying is important. And the reason is that, if you're working, let's say you're a painter and you're making paintings and you keep making paintings, eventually, you are going to improve. I mean, if you keep working, if you're working all the time, you are going to improve. But if there's an area or areas in which you have a deficiency in your working methods, and you don't focus on correcting those problems, you could very easily, and I've seen this, repeat that problem for years, for decades, for your whole life. You could just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And even though, overall your pictures may get better, you may be able to render more complicated subjects, you may have a better understanding of, certain aspects of the picture making process. But those areas that you're not focusing on, that you're not taking time to correct, may stay with you for your entire career. And it's really important that you take the time to try to fix those areas. Critique, feedback is important too. It's really important if you're working that you get feedback from people that have more skill and more experience than you have, so that you can identify those areas that you need to work on. So you can take a class, you can find professional artists or artists that just have more experience than you do, and most people are more than happy to look at the work of anyone, especially students. I mean, I get approached all the time. People say, "Yeah, I work. Do you want to look at my work?" And I'm more than happy to give anybody feedback on their work and to identify areas that they could improve in. But it's important that you identify these areas and then that you find ways, exercises that are specifically geared towards developing your technique in those areas. It's really important that you do that. There's a misconception that a lot of people have about making art, and I probably had the same misconception, a long time ago when I was younger, is that, if I'm making art, that's what I'm doing. I'm making art. So I'm working, so I'm engaged in the process of making a work of art. I'm manufacturing some kind of a work of art. So I'm working on this thing, and then, I work on it, and then it's finished. I've made some art. And then maybe I take a break, and maybe I jump right into the next project, and then I start to make some more art. And so you're just kind of, making art, and then you make a piece of art, and then you make some more art. And really, that's not what happens. That's not the way it works. What really has to happen is that you just work all the time. And a lot of the work that you do isn't specifically making or manufacturing works of art. A lot of the work that you do might just be developing your technique. It might be studying. It might be looking at the work that you're engaged in and problem solving, making preliminary sketches. Just going out and drawing is always important. So you're kind of working all the time. And if you're doing that, art happens. It's inevitable that will happen. But I have a lot of students who, I have some great students now and I've had in the past who work, a lot. And when in between classes or lessons, they're working. And when they come to see me for instruction, they have work that I can look at and I can give them feedback on it. And that's great. But I have a lot of other students who are reluctant to work and when they're not, actually in a class. And so, I'll see them a week or a couple of weeks after they've had a lesson or a class, and I say, have you done anything? Or, do you have anything for me to look at? And oftentimes I'll get, something along the lines of, well, I wanted to paint, but I didn't really have anything to paint. Or, I couldn't really think of anything to draw. And, I just don't understand that because, you can draw anything, as long as you're working, you're working and you're getting better. And it's a mistake to think that you have to be involved in manufacturing a great work of art, that you have this great idea. And this is another advantage to spending time developing technique, is that sometimes, and if you're an artist like I am, no matter what level you're at, you know how this is. Sometimes you don't have an idea. Sometimes you're not inspired. You don't have a work or an image that you're engaged with at the time. So what do? Do you sit around and watch TV and wait until the idea comes? No, you go out to the studio and you do exercises. You set up a still life and you draw. You draw a picture of your hand. You draw self-portraits. You copy the work of other artists by looking at pictures in books. You pick up a tool or an instrument or a type of material that you've never used before, that you only have a little bit of experience with, and you learn how to use that. That's what you do. That way you're working, or even studying. Get out a book and read about. If you don't understand Cubism, get some books about Cubism and read about it. So you can understand it. That will help you. That's developing your technique, and that's work. You don't have to be, in this mindset of I'm making a work of art in order to be working. You can be working. And so it's really important that you take some time, and I would encourage you to do this every day. Just take a little bit of, if you're working 2 hours a day, maybe take half an hour, 20 minutes. If you're only working a few hours a week, still maybe take half an hour a week and just work on developing technique, doing exercises. And there are myriad exercises you can do to develop your technique. It's important that you understand what your deficiencies are. If you're having trouble drawing, then set up some still lifes, draw. Go outside, maybe draw from the landscape. If you're having trouble with value relationships, really focus on that. Have you made a grayscale? Try to make a 9-step grayscale from white to black, where each incremental gray is equidistant visually from the one on either side of it. And that can be difficult to do. Do it with pencil, do it with charcoal, do it with ink, do it with paint. Make grayscales. That's a great exercise that you can do to help develop a sense of of values and how to create values, different lights and darks, using whatever material you have at your disposal. Drawing, and there are all kinds of drawing exercises you can do. One of the things that I like to do is just kind of as a warm up and to help develop my technique. I'll come out here, oftentimes at the beginning of a session in the studio, just to warm up, I'll get out a big sheet of newsprint or a pad of newsprint, and I'll just draw straight lines. Now that can be difficult if you haven't practiced doing it. I remember many years ago I was teaching a beginning drawing class. It was a class designed for beginners, people who had no experience. And in the first night of class, I would go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves and say whether they had any experience or not, because most of them were beginners, and I wanted everyone to know that they weren't alone if they didn't have any experience. And I remember one night this gentleman said, whatever his name was, I don't remember, it was many years ago, but he said his name, and then he said, "I have no experience at all. I can't even draw a straight line." And I said to him, "Well, drawing a straight line, that takes some skill and some practice." And I don't really think he understood what I was trying to say. But that's something that you can do. If you take out a piece of paper and a pencil and just try to make a straight line, a line that's perfectly straight, freehand, without using any kind of a straight edge or a ruler. That can be really difficult to do, and you might have to start out with shorter lines, maybe 4 or 6 inches, and then as you get better at it, make them longer. You can go left to right, right to left, top to bottom, bottom to top, diagonals. That's a great exercise, and do it with a pencil, do it with a pen, do it with charcoal, do it with a paintbrush. That's a great thing. Shapes, geometric shapes, ellipses are always important. Being able to draw ellipses, that's you can spend 10 minutes just filling a sheet of paper with ellipses of different proportions, drawing other geometric shapes, circles. Can you draw a perfect circle freehand? How many times you have to try to do that before you can do it. And then once you can make a perfect circle freehand, make them bigger, because the bigger they are, the more difficult it is to do. Triangles, squares, all the geometric shapes, really important. Transcriptions, copying other people's work. Get out a book of drawings by Rembrandt or whomever, and make copies. Just copy them. And I have people say to me, well, when it comes to talking, when I talk about doing transcriptions, they say, well, I don't want to copy other people's work. I want to do my own. Well, it's not about copying somebody's work and calling it yours. It's not the idea isn't that you copy a Rembrandt drawing and then put it in a frame and hang it on the wall and try to take the credit for it. The idea is that you learn. If you want to learn how to draw, if you want to learn how to translate this vast experience of life in the universe into line and value, there's no better place to go than Rembrandt. And you spend some time sitting down and copying his drawings, you will learn more about drawing than you could learn in a 4-year art college. That's really important. Doing transcriptions is a great exercise, and that's another thing you can do. Just copy other people's work, and it's important to always be working. I learned that a long time ago, and it took me some time to figure that out. That it's just important that you work. I try to work every day. I come out to the studio every day, and some days I'm just not in the mood. I'm not inspired. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe I just came out of a painting that was a disaster, and I'm feeling kind of demoralized. And so doing exercises is a wonderful thing, because it just gives you something to do without having this pressure of making art. You can just get out and some paper and some materials and make, just do an exercise. Make a grayscale or make a grid of colors. Put yellow at one end and red at the other, and see how many different shades of orange you can mix in between those two. And what happens is it can be tedious, but you get involved in this, and it's a process, and you're developing, you're learning as you do it, and you come out on the other end a better artist, because you've improved your technique and you've improved your skill. Yeah, maybe you haven't made a work of art, but you've become a better artist, and that's really important. That's why taking the time to develop your technique is of the utmost importance. And again, you can make up your own exercises. You can look online. There are a lot of videos on YouTube and other places that are specifically about technique. You know, you can, if you want to learn how to use a paintbrush, or learn how to use charcoal, or learn how to draw, you know, a human eye, or learn how to draw plants or clouds or whatever. I mean, you can find videos that will show you how to do that. You know, watch the videos, do the exercises, books. When I was learning, we didn't have YouTube, internet. I went to books. I went to the library. I got books. I bought books in the bookstore, and that was really helpful. You know, there's a lot of great books out there with a lot of great exercises in them, and you know, taking the time to work through those can be really, really valuable. It can be time well spent. If you're a beginner, or you're kind of at an intermediate level, it's really important also that you learn as many techniques as possible. Granted, you may not use them all. You know, at the end of the day, when you've become a more experienced artist and you've developed your own style, you may only use 5 or 10% of the techniques that you learned, maybe in combination with some that you've developed on your own, just out of necessity. Because if you're doing original work and you're trying to bring to fruition you know, these ideas, these concepts that have never been seen before, then that usually necessitates some new kind of technique in order to do that, because you're not recreating stuff that's already been done. But in the beginning, it's important that you learn as many techniques as possible, so that you can choose which ones you want to use and which ones you don't want to use. If you don't use a specific technique, it should never be because you can't do it, because you don't have the ability. It should be that you have the ability to do it, you learn how to do it, and then you chose not to do it for artistic reasons, because you felt that specific type of technique didn't apply to whatever your work is about. And that's very different than not doing something just because you can't do it. If you look at de Kooning's work, de Kooning could draw very well, and you'd be hard pressed to find an artist who had more control of a paintbrush than de Kooning did. I mean, he was really a virtuoso, and he chose to apply that to his abstract expressionist style of working. But if you look closely at his work, there's no question that he knew what he was doing when it came to drawing and painting, even though it might not be apparent to the trained eye. You couldn't do de Kooning. De Kooning couldn't have been de Kooning if he didn't know how to draw representationally as well as he could, and if he didn't know how to control a paintbrush as well as he could. And that was something, those were skills that he developed, maybe especially in the beginning, through more traditional academic ways. Looking at art too, studying art, by looking at it, experiencing it firsthand, that can be time very well spent. Go to galleries, go to museums. If you can't do that, there are always books, internet. But there's nothing like going to see real art, and think of it as work. Go see what the masters have done, look at the work, analyze it, bring a sketchbook, maybe copy the pictures a little bit. Really study the work of art, and ask yourself, how was this made? What kind of decisions did the artist make? That can be really valuable time. So if you're in a creative slump with your work, that's something that can really rejuvenate you. Going to look at other people's work and think of it as work. What you're doing. I'm working on my technique. I'm developing my knowledge. I'm developing my skill by going to a museum, going to a gallery, and looking at other people's work. And you are developing yourself as an artist. It's really important that you do that. I remember when I started to teach myself to paint. When I was in college and in grad school, I wanted to paint, but I had a lot of difficulty with it. And so I focused more on printmaking, etchings, and monotypes, and I did a lot of drawing. And years later, when I was out of school, I really went back to painting, and I really wanted to be able to do that. And got some paints and brushes, and I started making paintings, and I really had a lot of difficulty. And two of the areas that I found, I really felt like I was lost, were color and using a brush. Getting the paint to do what I wanted it to do by using the brush. It was really frustrating to me, because when it came to drawing with traditional drawing materials, charcoal, pastel, pencil, even ink, pen and ink, I could draw really well. I had a lot of skill when it came to drawing, because I'd spent thousands of hours drawing. So, I understood value relationships, composition, perspective, how to turn the three-dimensional world into two-dimensional form. I really know how to do that really well, but I couldn't get the brush to make the paint do what I wanted it to do. I really had a lot of difficulty with that. And at the same time, I was dealing with trying to mix colors and really not understanding that. So what I did was I took those two aspects that I realized I really had to work on, and I separated them. And so I spent a little bit of time every day just mixing colors. I made all these different charts and grids and scales of experimenting. How many different greens can I make from yellow and blue? And what if I use this blue, instead of that? How many greens can I get using cadmium yellow light and phthalo blue versus cadmium yellow light and ultramarine blue? And I made hundreds of these color charts and grids, and really all I was doing was mixing colors. Another exercise I used to do was just to take the primary colors, yellow, red, blue, and white, oil paint, and I would grab a pastel out of my box. I have hundreds of different color pastels. I would grab a pastel out of the box just randomly and try to recreate the color using only the primaries and white. And I could get pretty close, but sometimes it would take me 2 hours to do. And I learned so much about mixing color just trying to do that. Having a reference, this pastel stick in my hand, and okay, I'm going to mix this color using just the primaries. It's really difficult to do in the beginning. And I'm at the point now where, many years later, I can mix any color I want very quickly. I know the color I want, and I just know what the ingredients are, and I mix it. I can look at a painting, and I see a color, and I know how to make it. And that's not a talent. That's not a gift. That's something that's a skill that I developed through many, many, many long hours of working. And then at the same time, in order to develop my brush technique, I started making monochromatic paintings, just black and white, or maybe I'd use burnt umber and white. And I would mix up 9 different values from light to dark, starting with white. I'd mix my paints first, these little piles of paint. So I didn't even have to think about that. I had my 9 values laid out in front of me on the palette. And then I would do still lifes, self-portraits, copy other people's work, figure drawings, all kinds of drawings. And I would just make these monochromatic paintings. And the goal was, I really thought of it as drawing. I wasn't trying to make art. And my goal was to be able to get the paint and the brushes to do what I wanted them to do. And it was really frustrating at first because I knew how to draw. I knew what I wanted to be on the paper. I just couldn't get the brush to do it. And so there was a lot of trial and error. And eventually I figured it out. But I did this every night. Every night I would work on my mixing colors, and I would work on these monochromatic paintings every night for 2 years. I did that. It was a lot of work. And at the end, I developed a great deal of skill. And during that time, I wasn't making any paintings because I knew I needed to focus on developing my skill. And once I did that, then I started painting again. And I was really grateful that I'd taken the time to learn how to do those things. It's really important that you do that. Identify those areas that you're deficient in and devote some time to working on them. Even if it means taking a month. If you're painting and you're making paintings, and maybe your friends and your family tell you the work's good, or people like the work, maybe you sold a few things, but you show your work to someone who has a lot of experience, maybe a gallery owner or a professor at a college or something someone who knows about art, and they look at your work and they say, yeah, you really need to work on your drawing. Then what you need to do is stop painting, maybe take a drawing class, watch some videos, get a book, and take a few months, really, or maybe even a year, and devote it to learning how to draw. That's what you need to do. Do that, and then start painting again. It will be time well spent. I guarantee you that. So that's it for today. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're making art, take some time and devote it to developing your technique specifically. And don't worry about making art. Think of it this way. You're not making art, you're making an artist. Okay? So go to work. I'm Frank in the studio. Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to my channel. Share it with your friends. You can check out my blog. There's a link below the video if you want to see some of my work and read about my specific process. And until next time, have a great day.